If you walked into a market in ancient Athens, or even a bustling bazaar in 18th century London, you would have found a fruit that looked like a ruby gem. It was tart, complex, and considered essential for health. This tree has a dual identity that is unique in the botanical world. To the historian, it is the tree of war. Its wood is so dense it sinks in water, renowned for thousands of years as the material that built the spears of the Macedonian phalanx and, according to legend, the Trojan horse itself. But to the nutritionist and the chef, it is the lost tree of life. This is the story of the Cornelian cherry, Cornus mas. It is the fruit that fed Odysseus's men, cured Victorian dysentery, and then quietly disappeared from the American table. Welcome to Ancestral Yields. If you want to grow a garden that feeds you more than just calories, hit that like button and subscribe. Let's unearth the cornel. To understand the gravity of this plant, we have to look at how deeply it is embedded in the bedrock of Western civilization. The story begins in the 8th century BC with Homer's The Odyssey. When the sorceress Circe turns Odysseus's crew into swine, she feeds them a mixture of acorns and cornel berries to sustain them. For centuries, Victorian scholars interpreted this as an insult, as pig food. But agricultural historians and archaeobotanists now see it differently. In the Bronze Age, the cornel berry was a staple carbohydrate and vitamin source for everyone, royalty and peasant alike. It was wild, abundant forage that kept men alive during long campaigns. The tree was perhaps most revered in ancient Rome. According to the foundational myth of Rome, Romulus, the city's founder, stood on the Aventine Hill and hurled his spear toward the Palatine Hill to mark the city's boundary. The spear was made of Cornelian cherry wood. It struck the ground with such force that it took root and immediately blossomed into a tree. This sacred tree was walled off and worshipped for centuries. Plutarch writes that if a citizen saw the tree looking even slightly withered, they would scream, "Water," and people would run from all directions with buckets, as if rushing to put out a fire. The health of the Cornelian cherry tree was linked to the health of Rome itself. The Greek geographer Pausanias claimed that the Trojan horse was crafted from cornel wood, chosen for its supreme strength and resistance to rotting. Later, when Alexander the Great conquered the known world, his armies wielded the sarissa, a massive 18-foot pike. These spears had to be light enough for a soldier to hold, but strong enough not to shatter on impact with a shield. They were made of Cornelian cherry saplings. By the time we reached the Middle Ages, the focus shifted from war to healing. Saint Hildegard of Bingen, the famed 12th century mystic and healer, wrote extensively about the cornel and prescribed it for the digestive system. This tradition carried into 19th century England and colonial America, where it was called the rob of cornels, a thickened syrup made by boiling the berries down to a concentrate. It became a standard household remedy for dysentery, diarrhea, and fevers. It was essentially the Pepto-Bismol of the 1800s, a staple in the apothecary's jar. So how does a tree with that kind of resume get demoted to a landscaping shrub in the American suburbs? Up until the late 19th century, fruit was often treated as an ingredient, not a snack. Sugar was an expensive luxury imported from the Caribbean. Fruits that were naturally tart, astringent, or high in pectin, like quinces, medlars, currants, and Cornelian cherries, were valued because they preserved well. They cooked down into excellent jellies, sauces, and wines that provided flavor during the bland winter months. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, sugar became cheap and ubiquitous, and public taste shifted toward fruits that could be eaten raw, right off the tree, like candy. The Cornelian cherry has a specific, demanding eating window. If you pick it when it looks red and beautiful, like a Bing cherry, and pop it in your mouth, it will be shockingly astringent. It dries out the tongue, similar to a raw cranberry or an unripe persimmon. You have to wait until it turns a deep, dark maroon, a process called bledding. When the cell walls break down, the tannins fade and the sugars develop. Simultaneously, the true cherry prunus was undergoing massive selective breeding. Breeders made true cherries bigger, sweeter, and firmer. The Cornelian cherry, which was largely gathered from the wild or semi-wild hedgerows, was left behind. The final nail in the coffin came down to the pit. In the 20th century, food processing became automated. If you wanted to sell cherry pie filling, cherry jam, or dried cherries on a global scale, you needed machines that could remove the pit instantly without destroying the fruit. True cherries have a stone that is relatively loose in the flesh. We built machines that could pop them out by the millions. The Cornelian cherry, however, is a clingstone. The flesh adheres tightly to the elongated, olive-like pit due to fused fibers connecting the stone to the meat. Even today, there is no efficient industrial machine that can pit a Cornelian cherry without turning the flesh into a mash. To process Cornelian cherries, you usually have to cook them first to soften the bond between flesh and stone, and then pass them through a sieve or food mill. This method works beautifully for jams, sauces, and syrups, but it makes it almost impossible to sell them as pitted whole fruit in a plastic bag. To understand what we are missing, we must first clear up a case of mistaken identity. Despite the name, the Cornelian cherry is not a cherry at all. True cherries, like Bings, Rainiers, and Montmorency, belong to the genus Prunus. They are stone fruits related to peaches, plums, and almonds. The Cornelian cherry is a dogwood, Cornus. It is a member of a family usually known for inedible berries and white ornamental flowers found in suburban front yards. The Latin name Cornus comes from the word for horn, referring to the incredibly hard, horn-like density of the wood. But the fruit, botanically an olive-shaped drupe, is the real marvel. The deep red color of Cornelian cherries comes from massive amounts of anthocyanins, specifically cyanidin-3 galactoside and pelargonidin-3 galactoside. In studies conducted by the University of Belgrade, Cornelian cherries have shown anthocyanin contents ranging from 125 milligrams to over 250 milligrams per 100 grams. That rivals and often exceeds the tart cherry, which is sold as a high-priced supplement for joint pain and inflammation. Furthermore, Cornus mas contains a class of compounds called iridoids, including loganic acid. These compounds are rare in standard Western diet crops. A 2011 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology highlighted that these compounds possess significant anti-inflammatory and lipid-lowering properties. In animal studies involving diabetic rats, iridoid glycosides from this plant were shown to improve liver function and significantly lower blood sugar levels, suggesting potential as a functional food for metabolic health. The Florida orange is marketed as the king of immunity. A standard orange contains roughly 53 milligrams of vitamin C per 100 grams, about 3.5 ounces. According to a study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, the Cornelian cherry averages between 70 and 125 milligrams of vitamin C per 3.5 ounces, depending on the cultivar. That is double the antioxidant power of citrus. And Cornelian cherries do this while growing in a temperate climate where an orange tree would freeze to death. Essentially, it is a superfood disguised as a hedgerow plant. It blooms in late winter with brilliant yellow flowers, providing the very first nectar for bees, a biological signal that winter is ending and life is coming back to the land. But the Cornelian cherry did not disappear everywhere. While the West abandoned it for convenience, the East kept it for flavor. In Turkey, Iran, and the Caucasus, the fruit never lost its status. Known as kizil or zoghal, it is sold in baskets in Istanbul today, often eaten fresh with salt to balance the tartness, or turned into sharbat, a cooling fruit drink. For the American gardener, the Cornelian cherry solves the biggest headache of growing fruit. Pests. If you have ever tried to grow apples or sweet cherries in the Northeast or Midwest, you know the struggle against the plum curculio, the cherry fruit fly, and fungal rots. You have to spray constantly. Cornus mas is virtually immune to these pests. It is incredibly hardy, thriving in USDA zones 4 through 8. It can handle temperatures down to -25 degrees Fahrenheit, -32 degrees Celsius. It prefers well-draining soil, but is surprisingly tolerant of the heavy clay that kills other fruit trees. Before you rush out to forage, a word of caution for my American viewers is necessary. The Cornelian cherry. Cornus mas is a dogwood. The United States is home to a native cousin, the flowering dogwood, Cornus florida. The berries of the native flowering dogwood are bright red clusters, but they are toxic to humans and should not be eaten. You can tell them apart easily by looking at 3 distinct features. First, look at the flowers. Cornus mas has small, yellow star-like flowers that bloom in late winter before the leaves appear, whereas the native flowering dogwood has large white or pink showy flowers that bloom in spring after the leaves have unfurled. Second, inspect the fruit itself. The Cornus mas fruit looks like a single oblong cherry or olive, while the toxic native dogwood berries grow in tight clusters of tiny, round drupes. Finally, consider the harvest time. Cornus mas ripens in late summer, usually August or September. If you see red berries persisting deep into winter, that is likely the toxic variety. As always, never consume a wild plant unless you have 100% positive identification, and avoid foraging near roadsides where herbicides are sprayed. For those wanting to plant it, patience is a requirement, but the reward is generational. If you grow this tree from seed, it requires a complex stratification process and can take 6 to 10 years to produce its first fruit. However, if you purchase a grafted cultivar, you cut that wait time significantly, often seeing those ruby red drupes in as little as 2 to 3 years. Once established, this is not an ephemeral tree like a peach or a plum that burns out in 2 decades. The Cornelian cherry is an heirloom investment. These trees are exceptionally long-lived, often productive for over a century. In Europe, there are productive specimens documented to be over 300 years old. Excellent cultivars for the United States include Jolico, known for its huge fruit, red star, and yellow, a variety with yellow skin that is sweeter and less acidic. You can find these at specialty nurseries such as One Green World, Raintree Nursery, or Stark Bros. Plant them in full sun to partial shade. They are slow growers, eventually reaching 15 to 20 feet, making them perfect for small urban yards or permaculture food forests. Growing Cornus mas is a commitment to the long game. It is a tree that grows slowly, hardening its wood year by year, preparing to outlive the gardener who planted it. It offers a harvest that demands you enter the kitchen and cook, connecting you to the same rituals performed by Victorian apothecaries, Roman priests, and Greek heroes. It is the tree of war that brings peace to the gut. It is the forgotten gem of the hedgerow, and it is waiting for you to plant it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the botany of history, hit that like button. Subscribe to Ancestral Yields for more stories of the plants that built civilization. We will see you in the garden.